Welcome back to the NFL NBA Rectable. We were both off last week because of vacation, so we're coming back at you again this time with our NFL edition. We're going to be going over some preseason thoughts. Now, we have to go over the games that we get to see, so we're just going to be talking about the Bay Area teams, the Oakland Raiders and the San Francisco 49ers, because we don't get to see the other teams, so we can't really say much about them. So starting off with the Oakland Raiders, they've been a little up and down, but mostly some positive things in their first two games. One of the big things, just starting off, has been the running game. They've been putting up almost 250 yards per game. So what are some of the other things that you've seen coming out of the Raiders in their first two preseason games?
Well, you mentioned the big one, Alan, with the running game, that three-headed monster with Darren McFadden, Justin Fargas, and Michael Bush. But I also like the way Jamarcus Russell has been playing in the preseason. He looks very comfortable back there, and he looks like he's not going into his first full season. Someone mentioned it when they were playing Tennessee, that Vince Young looked like he was the rookie, and Jamarcus Russell looked like he was going into his third season. So I really like the composure that Jamarcus Russell has shown in the backfield.
Yeah, I really agree with that too. The big thing, of course, no turnovers in any of his drives. Granted, he's only thrown about 20 passes and only had that one touchdown drive against the Tennessee Titans. But the main thing, composure in the pocket, not getting sacked, not throwing any interceptions. But the big problem for him is that wide receiving core has not stepped up for him at all. Javon Walker has been playing really terrible. Ronald Curry's still coming off an injury, showed some flashes against Tennessee, but Drew Carter, another free agent signing, came in, was supposedly doing well at the beginning of camp, hasn't really shown much in the preseason game. So really this offense looks like it's going to be a work in progress, but the running game is really going to carry them for this season, and they're going to, I guess, try to win some games just purely on the run. Moving over to the defensive end, one of the biggest things that I saw was that the running defense, the big Achilles heel of that defense, 31st in the league last year, they were decent, showed some improvement against the first team players in the first game against the 49ers and the second game against the Titans, but the biggest problem is they're still inconsistent. They can stop some runs and then turn right around and give up a 20-plus yard run. What other concerns have you seen on this defense?
I think there's a lot of inconsistency with the cornerbacks as well. I mean, they have a couple of good ones with Nnamdi Asomugha and Stanford Routt, but still, and D'Angelo Hall and Asomugha have been coming off injuries, and there's really no depth after those three. And you take a look, they have Chris Johnson and Wadler, and these guys look like, Wadler at least looks like he's going to be cut. Chris Johnson really hasn't shown too much that I'd like to see. And if one of those top three guys goes down, I think this passing defense is going to take a serious step backwards.
Yeah, they really need to get healthy and get ready for the season, because they do have two Pro Bowl level cornerbacks, but after that it's a huge drop off, and if their lingering injuries leave it, that's still going to be a problem. Although the good part about it, the linebacking core still solid. Kirk Morrison, Thomas Howard, Ricky Brown very recently was just sort of put into the position at starting linebacker, strong side linebacker. Coach Lane Kiffin has come out and said that it's basically his job to lose at this point. Has played decently, but the big concern as well, the cornerback depth, and that defensive line just needs to shore up that run defense, and a little bit, I think, the pass rush too hasn't shown too much in these first couple games, but granted, it's the preseason. So moving over to the other side of the Bay now, the San Francisco 49ers, and of course the big question there, who is their quarterback? JT O'Sullivan, free agent signing, has been starting the first couple preseason games. He's reportedly going to start again in the third game, mostly because he was brought in with some experience with Mike Martz and that system back with the Detroit Lions, but hasn't played extremely well. Three turnovers in his 7 drives, and granted he threw their first offensive passing touchdown against the Green Bay Packers, but that was against the second team defense. So what do you make of this three-way competition for the quarterback spot?
I still think you have to go with Alex Smith. He is your most proven starting quarterback. Sean Hill had a nice run at the end of last season, but really Alex Smith, he did have some problems, but he did have that season in 2006 where he was he did lead that team almost to a playoff berth. They were only a game or two out. And yes, there's a lot of tension between him and head coach Mike Nolan, but I think he gives you the best chance to win just because JT O'Sullivan has the most reps, I guess you can put it, with the Mike Martz system. I still think Alex Smith has more talent, and if you give him the time, I think he can produce more results than O'Sullivan can.
Yeah, that was sort of an interesting matchup in that second preseason game. Alex Smith and Aaron Rodgers, of course, the two quarterbacks the San Francisco 49ers were thinking of drafting, took Alex Smith, Rodgers playing on the other side, now succeeding Brett Favre. But I think you made a good point that Alex Smith still is their most talented quarterback. I think that this might be a case where, granted the starter hasn't been named, but it looks like O'Sullivan might go into the season as the starter. But who knows, if he doesn't have success, Smith might be coming off the bench, towards the second half of the season. We'll still have to see. But I really kind of feel for him. 4 offensive coordinators in his 4 years. He hasn't had any time to ever really get comfortable with the system. Not getting along well with Mike Nolan, which I don't necessarily think is his fault. Mike Nolan's just sort of thrown him under a bus the past couple of years. So that whole situation is just really a mess. But the one good thing that the 49ers have going for them is that running game. And Frank Gore hasn't been playing in the preseason because he's a proven running back. But some of their other runners, Deshaun Foster came in against the Packers and really had one drive where he just absolutely carried the entire drive to a touchdown. So they have some players, but the other concern that I have is that wide receiving core. They still really haven't had a solid, outside threat for them. Vernon Davis has been underutilized. Arnaz Battles, still their best receiver. So what do you make about the skill position players around the quarterbacks?
Yeah, I don't think it's nearly good enough for them to be a playoff contending team. And I think playoffs are definitely way out of the question for the 49ers. But they just don't have the skill position players at wide receiver. Arnaz Battle has really been their number 1, number 2 threat for the past couple of years, and he's a guy that's going to give you 600, 700 receiving yards, and that's about where he tops out. They bring in Isaac Bruce. He's very old, though, and his days are well behind him. I'm not really impressed with what they have at wideout.
Yeah, and then looking on the reverse side, on the defensive end, they're very inconsistent. They have Patrick Willis, absolutely a stud, but outside of him in that front 7, they brought in Justin Smith, came on, had a sack against the Green Bay Packers, but there's not much in that front 7, and I'm not sure that they'll be able to carry that team. But the secondary, they have some solid players, but what do you make about that secondary for the 49ers?
I think the secondary has shown signs that they can be a very formidable force, but if you take a look at it, they haven't played that well. And yes, they did hold the Packers to 6 points. Aaron Rodgers was 9 of 16. He's just really getting his feet under him, though. So based on what they've done in the preseason, it's going to be an up and down season, I think, for that secondary.
Yeah, but like you mentioned, the biggest problem still, they just don't have that much talent. And just sort of inconsistent. That sort of sums up the entire 49ers organization right now, which is so unfortunate for such a storied franchise. But they're in the rebuilding process still, but slowly making steps. Patrick Willis last year was a big step in the right direction for them. So, but like we were always saying, this is the preseason, which amounts to basically nothing. But until the couple weeks we have until the regular season starts, that's all we got going for us. All right, well, thanks for tuning in to the NFL edition once again on the NFL NBA Rectable.